We left off where we were working on getting our borders around all of the contact info section of our contact page. Getting it exactly how we want based on the design file is a little tricky, so we're going to go ahead and finish that up in this video and see what we need to do to make it work. Alright, so here we are at the contact page where we left off, and one thing that I want to address actually before we go ahead and fix that up is over here, our send message button. I actually don't want this to just be a button around the text here. I'd actually like for this entire block here to be a button so that anywhere you press on here would be considered a button press instead of just having it be on the actual text and icon. Okay, so we can do this pretty easily. If we go ahead and I'm in contact.js and let's go up until we find right here is the grid item for the send message button. So we have currently a button that is wrapping the typography in the image, but instead of using the button directly, let's go ahead and we can actually turn the entire grid item into a button using the component prop that we've used before to turn things into links. So let's turn this entire grid item into a button by passing it just like that, and now we can go ahead and get rid of the button component and the entire section will now be clickable. One thing to keep in mind though is that we need our styles from send button, which if we scroll up is the text transform of none, and we also need the styles from button container, and that is our margin bottom of -4 rem. So I say we should just combine these. So let's move our text transform into the button container. Let's go ahead and get rid of that. Yep, get rid of send button, and now we can come down and we can now remove the button from inside. Remove the button here. So now we're just going to have our typography and our image inside of the grid that now is a component of button, and we'll have our styles there on the button container. So let's go ahead and save this and check it out in the browser. And so now it looks like there was not really any changes, but if we hover over this, well, we can see that we've got the click effect, but it also is turning it like transparent when we hover over it. So that's definitely not what we want. So let's go ahead and on that button container style, let's go ahead and override that using the &:hover so we can specify hover styles for this class. And let's go ahead and we will make this a background color of our theme.palette.secondary. So that is our darker color, but usually we do .main. So if we do that, that's just going to make it the same as the background color. So there's no effect on hover. But if we want something to actually show up, remember how I said if we just specify the main color for one of our primary or secondary colors in the theme, that it's also going to create a light and dark variant of that color. So if we set that to secondary.light, we can go ahead and save. And now when we hover over it, you see that it brightens it up, turning it into a slightly lighter color of our dark secondary color. So that works real nicely. One other tiny detail here is that you may notice that we now have curved corners. We've got rounded corners on this button because that's one of the default styles. So let's also go ahead and make sure this is outside of the hover style. So underneath text transform, let's give us a border radius of 0. So if we go ahead and save that and flip back on over, now we've got the sharp corners that we had before. Alright, so now let's get started working on fixing this up to get the border down here and the borders across for this crisscross pattern that we were looking for. So what we can do from here is if we inspect this, it might make it a little more clear. So here is our image and here's the whole row. And so here is the container for just the image. So what I think we should do is go ahead and set our border onto that image, and then each of these icons will have a border to the right, and then we'll modify things a little bit so that those borders touch all the way down and look like one line all the way across. Alright, so let's go ahead and we'll need to go down and find each of the items wrapping those images. So here's the image for our address icon, and here's the grid item wrapping it. Let's go ahead and give this a classes prop for the root class of this grid, and we will give it the classes.icon container class. All right, we'll go ahead and copy this onto each of the items wrapping our images here. But here you'll see that on the grid item wrapping the email SVG icon component, we already have the class set. Okay, so what we'll actually do, remember that we just have to make sure for the SVG icon component that we're setting dimensions on the parent component for it to appear properly. What we can do is we can go ahead and replace the contact email icon class with our icon container, and then inside of here we'll add a div, and this will now be the parent container, and so we can set our dimensions here. So now we can give this div the class name of classes dot and our contact email icon. Go ahead and open that div up and move our email SVG icon component inside. So now this div will be the parent component, giving the dimensions that our email SVG icon component will proportionally resize to. All right, just as we had before, but now we're moving that inside of here so that we can specify the icon container class on the actual grid item wrapping it. So now we can go up and actually create our icon container class. So icon container, and let's go ahead and we'll give it a border right of 2 pixels solid #FFF. So go ahead and save that. Let's flip on over to check it out. And look at that. We've got something that almost looks like what we want, but it seems like we're at least on the right track. So if I go ahead and I use the inspector, it makes it a little more clear what's going on here. So here is our container for each row, and then here's our container for the icon that we just added the border to. So we see that that border is only taking up the space that the item is taking up, and so it's actually not spanning this entire length, and it's not connected, giving us the look that we'd want. So what we can do is we can actually set a height and a width for the container and make sure that that's large enough for them to be connected, and then I think that that'll do what we want. So let's go ahead and we will give our icon container a height of 7 rem and a width of 8 rem. So this will just be a little bit longer in width, which gives us the overhanging look from the design file. So if we go ahead and save that, well, check that out. It is doing some weird stuff at first, but it actually is much closer to what we'd want. All right, so the problem that is causing it to stack like this is that we've actually set a fixed height here on the info container. We're setting a height of just 15 rem, and that's not large enough, and so it's causing all of these to break onto separate lines. All right, so if we go ahead and find our icon container, or info container class rather, that's the height that we're setting for all of the contact info section. So let's go ahead and let's try doubling this to 30 rem and save. And check that out. It looks like they're all coming together much closer to what we want, but we obviously still have a few things to fix up. So it looks like we're still actually putting too much space here. Now we set the height to be too much, and so that's what's causing the space here for it all to be pulled apart. So let's go ahead and reduce this space. Let's go ahead and reduce it to, say, 24 rem. Save that and try it out. See, now they're much closer together because the overall container is shorter, so that's pushing them closer together. Let's also go ahead and we now will not want any padding inside of this middle container, because if we inspect that, let's inspect the element here, you see that we've got some padding here that we had added to the middle info class, and that's actually pushing it from the top and the bottom borders, but we're going to want all these to connect. So for the middle info class, the padding that we had set, let's go ahead and remove that. And if we save that, that's going to bring our top borders and middle borders all combined here, the top and the bottom and the middle rather. And so now we just need to keep reducing the height a little bit to get all of these to connect. So let's go ahead, and the height of 24 rem for the info container. Let's go ahead and try 22 rem and save that. And it looks like that's really close. So we could try 21.5. I'm just showing this because this is really the process that you'll be using on your own projects of tweaking things up and down and seeing how it works. And we're almost right about there. So let's try 21.25 rem. And it looks like that gave us exactly the effect that we are looking from the design file. Now, the only thing we need to fix here is obviously our icons are now not aligned because we set the fixed height and width for that div or the grid item that is containing them. And so we need to make sure that our image is actually centered within that item. Okay, so we can go ahead and use the trick that we used before up with our block container to align the text inside of these sections. So we'll go ahead and on our new icon container, we can go ahead and add the display of flex. So now we're using Flexbox, and then we will set the justify content of center and the align items of center as well. So if we save that, now we see all of our icons jumping into the middle. Now I think they've got just a little too much spacing here on the right side of them. That's actually because we've added a margin right to the contact email icon and the contact icon classes. So let's go ahead and get rid of that margin. Go ahead and save. And now I think that looks exactly like we wanted. Before we go, I noticed a couple videos ago, I just keep forgetting to address it. Up here in the top, when we went and resized our header, our logo text for the extra small screen size, we actually forgot to put that for just the extra small screen size. So that shrunk it down for all the sizes. So let's go ahead and open up our header.js. And here where we've set the logo class with the font size of 3 rem, we only want to do that at our theme.breakpoints.down for extra small. So let's go ahead and move that guy inside of there and save. And now we have the logo size from before, and our contact page is really shaping up.